What's up, Football Daily? With the World Cup now almost over, let's take a look at 10 players we expected more from in Qatar. 10. Nico Schlotterbeck. One of the most highly rated young centre-backs in Europe, Nico Schlotterbeck became a household name in Germany last year after becoming a regular for Freiburg, and his dynamic defensive displays earned him spots in multiple teams of the year, a €20 million move to Borussia Dortmund, and a starting berth in Hansi Flick's Germany setup. But he has struggled to consistently produce his Freiburg form at Dortmund, with his new side currently sitting 6th in the Bully, 5 points behind his former employers who continue to impress in his absence. And when it came to the World Cup, he didn't take his chance, with Flick's side losing their first game against Japan in 8 frantic second half minutes, in which the 23-year-old Niklas Süle and Antonio Rüdiger were unable to stop Ritsu Doan and Takuma Asano scoring on the counter. And while the experienced Süle and Rüdiger kept their places, Schlotterbeck lost the trust of Flick, with his only subsequent minutes coming in the dying embers of their draw with Spain as he replaced an injured David Raum. As Germany searched for answers following another poor showing at a major tournament, Schlotterbeck faces a challenge to get himself back in the first team. 9. Jesper Lindstrom. Another youngster who has made waves in the Bundesliga over the last 18 months, Jesper Lindstrøm came into the World Cup on top form, with 6 goals in 14 league appearances for Eintracht Frankfurt so far this term. And with Mikkel Damsgaard, Denmark's breakout star of Euro 2020, struggling for form and fitness over the last 18 months, Lindstrøm entered Qatar as the country's new one to watch. But unlike his club teammate Daichi Kamada, who played a vital role in Japan's excellent group stage performance, the Danish winger was unable to translate his domestic form to the world stage, taking just 3 shots across 3 appearances and failing to create a single chance as Kasper Hullmann's side crashed out with just 1 point. To blame all of this on a 22-year-old winger would of course be unfair, and it was ultimately an incredibly poor team performance that saw their fate sealed by a much unfancied Australia side. But it's hard not to think that this was a missed opportunity for the youngster. Luckily for him, he's got another chance to show the world what he's about when Frankfurt play Napoli in the Champions League last 16. 8. Edouard Mendy. Having been dropped by Graham Potter at Chelsea 2 months before the start of the World Cup, Edouard Mendy came to Qatar with his reputation at a low point. Following his heroics in Chelsea's remarkable run to Champions League glory in 2021, errors began creeping into his game last season and continued into the new campaign, leading to Kepa being reinstated as the Blues' number 1. But having saved penalties in 2 highly important shootouts against Egypt, one in the Africa Cup of Nations final in January and another in a World Cup playoff 2 months later, his international stock remained high, and with the formidable duo of Kalidou Koulibaly and Abdou Diallo in front of him, Senegal came into the tournament with confidence. However, Mendy's decision-making was once again shaky, arguably at fault for both the late Netherlands goals in a 2-0 defeat, which on the balance of play probably should have been a draw. That result ultimately cost Aliou Cissé's side top spot in their group and a second round meeting with the USA, and faced with stronger opponents in England, crashed out 3-0, with Mendy once again in poor form for Jordan Henderson's well-worked but weakly struck opener. With Mane out injured and Mendy in this kind of form, the quarterfinals was always going to be a big ask for the African champions. 7. Papu Gomez. 35 in February, and having struggled to make his mark at Sevilla since moving from Atalanta 2 years ago, few expected Papu Gomez to play a major role for Argentina at this World Cup, especially given he came into the tournament with just 15 caps to his name and featured only sporadically in qualifying. But off the back of a tremendous 36-game unbeaten run, manager Lionel Scaloni had enough money in the bank to include Gomez in the attack for their opening match against Saudi Arabia without facing too much criticism. That was until they lost the game, with the veteran failing to make an impact, creating 0 chances and taking a single shot from outside the box, which missed the target by miles before being replaced by Julian Alvarez in the second half. He was given no minutes for the Albi Celestes following 2 games as Scaloni repaired the damage of the Saudi loss, and once again had minimal impact when he was reinstated for the task of beating Australia in the last 16 before being hooked on 50 minutes. It was no surprise to see him not feature at all against the Netherlands in the quarters. 6. Robert Lewandowski. Given his terrible record at international tournaments, we shouldn't really have expected too much from Robert Lewandowski in Qatar. But as football fans, we're more than entitled to dream, especially when the player in question is one of the greatest goal scorers in history and remains in superb form at club level. And to be fair to the Poland legend, he did finally get his first World Cup goals and was excellent in their 2-0 win over Saudi Arabia, in which he scored and assisted. But he was rarely a galvanising force for his country otherwise, failing to even take a shot in their opening game against Mexico, and with with goalkeeper Wojciech Szczesny making a more decisive impact with penalty saves at crucial moments against Saudi and Argentina. Given their limited squad, going out to France in the last 16 is probably about as good as Poland fans would have hoped for, but they were somewhat lucky to get there given just how tight Group C was, and it's difficult not to feel that a man with 558 career goals, 78 of which have come at international level, should have a World Cup quarter-final under his belt before retiring. 5. Steven Bergwijn. His time at Tottenham may have been pretty forgettable barring a couple of clutch goals, but Steven Bergwijn's return to the Netherlands has been sensational, with the forward netting 8 and assisting 3 in 14 Eredivisie appearances for Ajax. But unlike at the Johan Cruyff Arena where he plays primarily on the left, Louis van Gaal operates with a front two, which in theory isn't a problem for Bergwijn, who played a number of minutes at centre forward during the Nations League in autumn. However, he struggled alongside Vincent Janssen in their opener against Senegal, with the Iranier only breaking the deadlock after Cody Gakpo was pushed further forward following Bergwijn's substitution. He was then hooked at half-time against Ecuador, and the forward duo of Gakpo and Memphis looked immeasurably better after that. And with Ajax teammate Davy Klaassen also impressing in Qatar, Bergwijn played back up until the quarter-finals, having managed just 1 shot, 1 dribble and 0 key passes in 3 appearances, and was again hooked at half-time against Argentina. He'll be hoping for more luck once Ronald Koeman, who gave him his international debut in 2018, returns to the dugout next year. 4. Unai Simon. With Kepa, David Raya and Robert Sanchez all in competition with him, Unai Simon did well to hold down his place as Spain's number 1 ahead of Qatar. But with Luis Enrique's side crashing out in the second round to Morocco, arguably the best defence in the competition, it's hard not to wonder whether a more solid goalkeeping performance would have saved them a tie with their North African rivals. In 3 second-half minutes against Japan, Simon was at fault twice as Spain conceded 2 goals to relinquish their place at the top of Group E. And while the attack must take a fair amount of blame for not creating enough clear-cut scoring opportunities after the Costa Rica match, it is Simon's mistakes that ultimately cost them. His shakiness on the ball under pressure also helped to elevate the confidence of Ritsu Doan and co as they look to destabilise the Spanish back line, and it will no doubt be an issue that Luis Enrique's successor will be looking into ahead of the next major tournament. A more than solid La Liga stopper, Simon will need to bounce back quickly once domestic football resumes. 3. Fede Valverde. Someone who is now generally considered among the 10 best midfielders in world football, Fede Valverde is the jewel in the crown of Uruguay's new generation of talent, now in his 5th campaign at Real Madrid, where only David Alaba and Vinicius Jr. have played more minutes than him this season. He's also the club's top scorer in the league and has developed a knack for netting screamers this term. The stage was set for him to do something spectacular in Qatar. But with Uruguay failing to score in their opening 2 games, Valverde was unable to make a meaningful contribution, as a side expected to make it to at least the last 16 finished 3rd in their group below South Korea. It wasn't for lack of trying. The 24-year-old was very active defensively, making 4 tackles and interceptions a match with an 88% tackle success rate and completing 7 passes into the final third each match. But he was blunt in attack. Despite taking 7 shots across 3 games, by far the most in the Uruguay squad, his attempts came from an average of 33 yards out and only 1 hit the target. When such a talent is taking pot shots from that far out of the box, you know they're frustrated, and Valverde came to embody a frustrating tournament for the 2-time world champions. 2. Filip Kostic. Like Denmark and Uruguay, Serbia came into the Qatar World Cup as one of the dark horses, with our very own Joe Tomlinson predicting them to make the quarter-finals, but instead were knocked out in the groups. And while they were better value than the 2 previously mentioned nations, putting up a decent defensive display against Brazil and going ahead against Cameroon and Switzerland, there was one member of the team who we expected more from. Filip Kostic entered Qatar with one of the most feared deliveries in world football, having registered over 40 league assists across 4 seasons at Frankfurt and adding an extra 5 for Juventus after a slow start to the Serie A season. With Mitrovic and Vlahovic to aim for, we expected him to be a menace in the group stage. But it wasn't to be. Kostic missed their opener against Brazil through illness and was nowhere near his best after that, creating just 1 chance across the 2 games with Cameroon and Switzerland, despite his side scoring 5 across the 2 fixtures. Now 30, this was Kostic's best chance to showcase his talent on the world stage. 1. Gareth Bale. Few players will be as disappointed with their World Cup performance as Gareth Bale. with his beloved Wales limping out of the tournament after being outplayed by both Iran and England. And whereas Bale had previously been a talisman for the Dragons, scoring free kicks against Austria and Ukraine to seal their place in Qatar, he was far less effective after touching down in the Gulf state. A penalty against the USA earned his side a point in the first game, but it had been the introduction of Kiefer Moore rather than any individual brilliance from the former Madrid man that really changed the game. And he was unable to conjure any magic in the disappointing defeats that followed, failing to take a shot in the box from open play in all 3 games and coming off at half-time against England with a hamstring injury. His teammate Aaron Ramsey was arguably even worse, but has also never been burdened with the expectation that Bale has. With the once great winger prioritising Wales over his club football over the last 2 years, let's hope to see him back at Euro 2024. So those were our 10 most disappointing players at the World Cup, but what did you make of our selection and did we miss anyone out? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please leave it a like, and if you're new here, please subscribe to Football Daily as we put videos like this out every single day. Thanks for watching, we'll see you next time.